Oh my god, you guys! It's Easter! Which means that if you're not Christian, you don't care about this weekend at all. But that's okay. Because whenever I think Easter, I think Resident Evil. Because there's any game that represents the idea of dying and coming back to life, I think it's Resident Evil. Oh my god, I can't believe I just made that joke. Okay, so when I was asked to review Resident Evil, I wasn't really sure which Resident Evil I should do. I assumed they meant the original one. But here's the thing about me. My favorite survival horror game of all time, like one that can be called a true survival horror game, is Resident Evil. The remake on the GameCube. See, I never actually played Resident Evil when I first owned a PlayStation. I just never did. It never happened. It was never a game that I actually had purchased and played. So I really didn't know that much about the first game going in. But I figured, hey, this is the game that started it all. Leading up to an entire, series of games, some good, some bad. But now it's a well-known staple in the gaming industry. So obviously the first game must be something pretty incredible.
It was Bravo Team's helicopter. Nobody was in it. But strangely, most of the equipment was still there.
Joseph!
No! Don't go!
Chris Redfield. Jill Valentine. Barry Burton. Rebecca Chambers. Albert Wesker. Resident Evil.
I'm sorry, if this comment comes from a position of some ignorance, but speaking from my perspective at the moment, why did anyone like this game?
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But Chris is...
What is it?
It's not just the voice acting or the acting in general, as the case may be. Although, trust me, that's a good place to start. It really is everything about it. To say that the first Resident Evil game hasn't aged well is probably the understatement of the century.
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Thanks. Maybe I'll need it.
Of the millennium. It really isn't very good on multiple levels, whether it be the tank-like controls or whether it be the oddly bright atmosphere, whether it be the cornball acting that makes me laugh. There is an animation in the game when you can kill a zombie where the character literally kicks their head off. That made me laugh when it first happened. Out loud, which I'm pretty sure is the exact opposite effect most horror games are going for. The whole thing feels very campy, and that sort of troubles me when this is supposed to be, the staple in terms of console survival horror games. So then I got to thinking, so why would this game be so popular if it, for all intents and purposes, really was never that great when you compare it to other games? And I realized that console gamers at the time had very little experience with survival horror games. All the good ones were on the PC up until this point, whether it be Alone in the Dark, or whether it be I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream, or even System Shock, which really wasn't survival horror, but still a scary game. They were all PC games. I'm sorry, is that going to be a thing now? Because I just would like to establish that that's going to be a thing now. Prior to Resident Evil, the only survival horror game I could think of that came out of the console was Clock Tower, and that was relatively obscure, especially in America. You didn't really get many people playing that game, you know, over here. And I guess you could say Splatterhouse is a horror game, but to begin with, that's not survival horror. Secondly, Splatterhouse really was never that good. It was just gory. You know, I mean, it had its moments, but it wasn't the same. So I think why Resident Evil was so good at the time was because it was the first time most console gamers, people who hadn't touched the PC, had even considered playing a survival horror game. It was, to them, a very new genre, even if that wasn't really true. I mean, heck, Silent Hill is probably a better survival horror game overall when compared to the original Resident Evil. But it was released in 1999. The original Resident Evil came out in 96. Hell, by 1999, Resident Evil 3 was released that year. So let's try to talk about the game from a constructive perspective. Taking all that into account, is the game worth playing, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. And the answer is, I guess if you're really into that sort of thing, I honestly, I'm gonna say no. I am gonna say no. This game is aged so poorly that I really don't think, even, you know, out of curiosity's sake, it would be worth playing. Maybe if you want to download, you know, an ISO online and play it through an emulator, you know, that wouldn't be so bad, since you're not losing any money in that regard. Or maybe if you want it for your game collection, you know, as a piece of gaming history, because it is. But playing the game now, there's no reason to when you have the GameCube re-release, or more recently, the HD re-release.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Both of which are far in a way superior to the original. I mean, excruciatingly so. I mean, I would expect graphics to be superior, but oh my god, literally everything was improved. Acting, visuals, gameplay, even new puzzles were added. The content was improved in the game. So playing the original now just feels really lacking, especially as someone who started playing the remake on the GameCube first. If you've played that already and you haven't played the original game, then I wouldn't bother, because you're probably not even going to like it. Because you're just going to want to go play the better version. And I know I always say that you shouldn't judge a game based on current standards. You should always judge it based off the standards that were in place when the game was released. But as I said, if you were a PC gamer back during this time, then you probably weren't really fond of Resident Evil, because there were games that were better than it on the PC. Speaking from a strictly console perspective, Resident Evil ushered in a new type of genre to that audience, so you gotta give it that much. It had a lot of good ideas. Having to manage your inventory and worry about whether you have enough ammo to keep going added a new type of element to the game. Even controlling how many times you could save. You had to consider when was the best time to save, or whether you should at all, or just risk it. I mean, these are thoughts that don't really permeate most other games. Most other games don't limit how many times you can save it. So, taking that into account, Resident Evil had some good things going for it. I just think it's all ruined by the questionable controls, and the fact that the acting is so unbelievably poor that it's going to make you laugh rather than scream. Which, again, is not good for a horror game. So I'm going to make amends now for trashing original Resident Evil to a certain extent, and review its better version, the one that I happen to like. That's not the GameCube version, because I can't record footage from that. But that's okay, because the HD re-release is basically the GameCube version with some slight improvements. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, there are basically only 2 differences between this version and the GameCube version. For one thing, they added a new control scheme that lets you control your character in, 3 dimensions. You're not spinning around like a tank like you were in the PlayStation and GameCube versions. Yes, even the GameCube re-release had these tank-like controls, which by that point were far and away outdated. But you could choose both control schemes, whether you want the retro feel or whether or not you want the more modern equivalent, which I happen to prefer the modern version because it's just way easier. The other thing they added in the HD version is jiggle physics. Yes, they gave Jill jiggle physics. I'm not even gonna comment on that. I just felt like pointing that out because I just feel like that's something to mention. I don't know why they did that. It's not even subtle. Like you can tell. Jill was never even particularly busty. I have no idea why her breasts would be doing that. Like DOA, I get it because their breasts are huge. That would make sense, and half of them don't even wear bras. But Jill, I don't see why. I'm pretty sure that's not how breasts tend to bounce. I don't really mind. Have you seen my wall? That doesn't really mean much to me. I'm not gonna say it's a bad thing, because I don't care. Shit, I have a Biohazard 3 poster right here. Can you see that right there? That's Jill in Biohazard 3. So like I don't really mind this whole thing, but maybe you're someone who's bothered by that, because it's actually sometimes very distracting. Okay, so getting away from that, the game is a lot darker. I mean, the atmosphere is fucking perfect in this game. The mansion is much more dimly lit, and it's genuinely creepy just walking around. It's not even just about jump scares. There are a couple of jump scares in Resident Evil, which is something I hate, but they're not really that often, and the thing about this game is it's all about that creepy atmosphere. It's all about wandering around and being concerned about what you're gonna find in the next room. Honestly, in Resident Evil, in all the versions, half the fear comes from whether or not you have enough resources to keep going. Whether you're going to run out of ammo at any given moment, or run out of health pickups at any given moment. Items aren't infinite. You can't always find things like herbs or bullets. You have to be conservative. There's plenty of times where you run into a situation where it might be better to run away than to fight. Again, this is a thing that's present in every single version of the game. And honestly, it's a really good survival horror aspect. We live in an age where the idea of proper survival horror game is very non-existent. A lot of them have gone the way of, action games. And I don't know why every single one of them has felt they need to do this. Even Resident Evil has done this, and I don't fucking know why. Because that's not why we played the series. That's not why any of the gamers enjoyed the series. So why would you change it so drastically? Comparing RE6 to the original Resident Evil, it's not even remotely the same. They are not comparable as games that even exist in the same series. Shit, I would argue that even 4 has the same problem by comparison, because 4 started that whole action bullshit, alright? I know a lot of people like that game, but that's where that started, when it became way more actiony, and 5 only added on to it, and 6 just kept the progression going. It's just 6 was apparently too much for everybody. And now all of a sudden, oh no, we don't want Action Capcom, even though up to that point, you've been buying it, so what other conclusion are they gonna draw? Even Dead Space has done it. From what I understand, I haven't played it yet, but Dead Space 3 is way more of an action game than 1 and 2. Which annoys me, because again, it's not the reason why people like the first 2 games, so why would you change it to that of all things? Why would you take out the elements we enjoyed? I mean, maybe they thought they couldn't do anything else with it. With RE4, I get it a little bit, because by the time 3 came around, the idea of the games became very, very stale, but still. Anyway, I got way sidetracked there. The HD re-release of Resident Evil is really good, though, and I highly recommend it if you haven't already played the GameCube version. And in fact, even if you have played the GameCube version, I would recommend it. It's a really, really good game. But Resident Evil really doesn't make any damn sense. Like, it never really did. Why would you set up a mansion in this regard? I mean, okay, I want you to think about this. All right. To begin with, many of the doors are locked, but they're all locked, but by keys with swords, shields, and helmets on them. And I don't understand the principle of that. How does anyone even get around? How did Wesker, who disappeared in the beginning of the game, get around at all when Jill or Chris, respectively, are the ones who had the keys to move? Even Barry has this problem. How are you getting through the mansion if you don't have the keys? I mean, spoiler warning, maybe Wesker did have a key, but Barry shouldn't have. I wouldn't think. I don't know. Maybe he did. But then why would they relock the doors? Just to inhibit Jill to be an ass? I don't understand. Alright, so, and why are there so many weird, archaic traps in this mansion? Why would you set it up that way? To guard really ridiculous things like keys. Like, there's this whole freaking spike trap just to guard one key. Just one key, or you might get, like, fucking impaled. I don't get that at all. And then when like, there's a journal entry where the head of the house, Spencer, tells one of his, cohorts to hide a fake key, which is what you have to replace, with the real key, rather vice versa of that, whatever I just said. But he hides it on the collar of a dog, and apparently this is crucial to something. I don't know. And there's a room with poison gas because why the fuck not? I don't really know why you would lay out a mansion like this. Who set this up? Like, this must have taken time to do. And then there's the whole coffin thing with the mask. Like, who the fuck set that up? And why? The whole point of the coffin was so it would never be opened again. So why even make it an option? Why not, I don't know, bury it? Because that would be the best way to handle that. That's not the way you handled it at all, though. You handled it the most mind-numbing way possible. I don't get this place, okay? Okay. I mean, granted, if you follow the plot, the whole mansion was designed by someone who went completely mad, so maybe that makes a bit sense, but why would anyone allow him to set it up that way unless they wanted it to make it more difficult for their employees to get it? I don't get it, okay? I just don't get it. That's just me, though. There's a hidden door that opens with the Moonlight Sonata. Why is there a hidden door that opens with the Moonlight Sonata? I just really need to know this. It is relevant to my interests. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.